profile of a mission, going into Germany. Give you some idea what a formation looks like. There's 6 men in each aircraft, and the right wingman of the lead airplane has a photographer aboard, which gives us a total of 7 men. One of the things I want to show you here is, I don't know if you can see this or not, this is a place called Thalesweiler. And this picture was taken on January the 2nd of 1945. This was during the period of the Battle of the Bulge. We had a, I think it was 7th Army intelligence officer attached to our group. And when we would go to our briefings, the briefings were broken down in segments, and the intelligence officer would come in and tell us what our target was that day and why it was important. And then he would tell us the results of our bombing of the day before and what we accomplished. Well, this was during the Battle of the Bulge, and we hit this target. It's located west of Landau and southeast of Kaiserlautern. And to get to it, we went in south of it. We flew to the Rhine River, flew up north, then back west, and actually bombed them from the west. Then broke 180 degrees to the right, went back to the Rhine River and down, and then came out to the west. And the reason for that was we were being routed around flak. We were told the next day by our intelligence officer that this was a barracks area that we had hit, and we had the entire officer complement of a German division. We killed 1,000 officers, at least that's what they told us that day, which represented the entire officer staff of a division for the Germans, and that was during the Battle of the Bulge, which was an extremely critical point. This is a picture of an echelon. When we would return to our base, we would take all 6 aircraft and go up into an echelon and fly upwind. And when we got to the end of the field, the first airplane would break off and start its landing pattern. At 15-second intervals, each aircraft would break off. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's 3 or 4 airplanes in this picture. And unfortunately, this was taken with a fixed lens, because that's all I had then. So it doesn't really show the proper proximity of how close we truly were. But it was very close. And I remember one time we were on echelon coming back, one of the pilots out around 4th position or 5th position lost it, and he went up like this and came down between the formation like that. Didn't hit anybody, but he sure could have. Scared a lot of people. I want to show you this because this shows you what a bomb drop looks like. I think those are probably 500s because we could carry 8 500s or 4 1000s. Here's a picture of me flying a B-26. Around January of 1945, as we would go into Germany, we started noting contrails, and they were high. They were up around 30,000 feet. And we learned that they were the German jet, the Me-262. The Germans built something over 1,400 to 1,500 of them, and thank God they didn't use them earlier because Hitler tried to make them make a bomber out of it, which they were never successful in doing. But at the last part of the war, from January on, there was an officer named Adolf Galland. He was a general officer in the Luftwaffe, and he fell into disrepute with Hitler, and Hitler put him back on combat status. So he went through the Luftwaffe and corralled their best pilots, fighter pilots that had flown in combat all the way back from Spain. So they had 5 years of experience. And took them down to Munich. They got about 50 Me-262 jet fighters down there. And that airplane was absolutely devastating. It was had 4 30mm cannons on it, and they put 24 55mm rockets under the wing. You could take a whole flight out in one mission, and I saw him do it. But they, for some reason, from January until April, they didn't attack us. They would meet us, and fly all the way in with us. We learned later that what they were doing is developing tactics on us, how to attack us. And they were also radioing our heading so they could predetermine what our target would be. I remember one time we went up in the early part of January and we had what we call spares with 3 airplanes. And as our airplanes would develop malfunctions, they would pull out and return to base, so the spares would fill in. Well, it all filled in except one. And we just got to the combat line. He was ready to turn around and go back, and he looked up and saw an Me-262. And I thought he used good judgment. He didn't want to go home alone because he would have been dangerously exposed. And what he did is just climbed up there and tacked himself onto one of our flights and flew the mission, which I thought was the proper decision. We had a mission to a place called Gunzenhausen. This is on the 17th of April, 1945. It was an ammunition dump. We had 4 flights of B-26s and 4 fighters. And I was flying a 26 that was a later model, and we had throat mics with a mic switch on the yoke, but the switch on my airplane was broken, so I had to have a hand mic. And that's a problem because a hand mic, you got to hold your mouth and depress a button to transmit. And when you got your left hand on the wheel and the right hand on the throttles, that's a little difficult to do. We were starting our bomb run, and our heading was the order of 045 degrees northeast. I knew we were going to break to the west, due west, which would be a 135-degree left turn. And as we started our bomb run, the turret called, my turret called, was Otis Timlin, and said, we've got 2 Me-262s that have engaged our high escort. We had 2 P-47s up high and 2 of them down at our wing level. And Otis was giving us a description of this combat. And one of the Me-262s shot down one of the P-47s, so we only had one on top cover. I knew that we were under attack, so when you're in the bomb run, you pull out, and the lead airplane has a bombardier and a bomb sight. The wingman, the other 5 airplanes, the number 3 has a sight, but that's an alternate lead. The other wingmen have just a bombardier, but he has no sight. So what we do is pull out and fly level. When the doors open, we open our doors. When we see the first bomb come out, our bombardier releases our bombs. And I knew that was going to happen, and so I'm on the level. As soon as our bombs were gone, I knew that the lead was going to roll it over tight and dive and get out of there. One of the worst things I could do is straggle, because I would create problems for the rest of my formation. So what I did is got up and I literally got on top of him, so it was on his center line, so that I didn't have to fly any faster than he did. It must have scared him because I was really on top of him, but we went all the way around, losing altitude, coming out to the west, at which point I pulled back out, and I was sitting so I could look right down on his wingtip like this. My prop was clearing his wing by 12 feet. And I'm getting shot. I feel somebody hitting me. I can hear it hitting the airplane, and every time it hit the airplane, it's, hey, back here someplace. And every time it hit me, it would bounce. And nobody else in our flight seemed to be bothered. I remember the engineer of the lead airplane was up there waving at me. We almost reach out and shake hands with him. I was so close to him. Well, I had developed an evasive action that, see, when a fighter attacks you, he assumes that we're doing what's called coordinated control. It means the airplane's not slipping or skidding. And when he is firing at me, he's not firing where I am now, he's firing at where I'm going to be. And my problem is not to be there. So what I had done is come up with a program where if I'm in this position, I can't pull out formation, but I can raise the airplane up 20 foot and I can skid it out about 50 feet. When I'm skidding, I'm not coordinated. So if he's shooting at me while I'm skidding, he's going to fire where I should have been, because I'm not going to be there. I would fly over 20, about 50 foot, drop down 20 feet, skid back. So I could fly a rectangle like that and maintain my position relative to the lead airplane. Well, in this case, I'm getting shot at. And so I want to get out of that position as soon as I can. So what I did is I raised my wing up like this. And when I did, an ME-262 passed between the lead airplane and me. It's a big airplane. It's 51 foot in wingspan. Now, the big advantage of that was, what he thought is, when he went through like this, there's cams back here that prevent the gun from firing in this direction because of the prop. But I had the wing down, about 30 degrees. And so the guns are laced, dressed forward, and he flew right into him. You reach out and touch him. And that airplane just disintegrated in front of me. The canopy came off, I can remember it very clearly. The airplane just started coming apart. My windscreen was covered with blood. I have copies over here of military interrogation over this permanent record that I'll be glad to show you. I'm going to give you copies of it if you want. When we returned to the base, here's a picture of my crew that was with me that day. This is George Belinsky, who was my co-pilot. This is Otis Timlin, who was the turret gunner that actually shot the ME-262 down. And we believe this was Gunther Lutzow, it's L-U-T-Z-O-W, who had been flying combat since the beginning of the war. He had 107 kills, and he was, I have photographs of him at my home in Florida, and he was personally decorated by Hitler. This is Sutton, my bombardier. Ooh, yeah, I'll never forget it. When that airplane passed through there, to get down the bombardier's compartment in the nose, the co-pilot's got to slide his seat back. Now, George Belinsky is about 6'2", and Sutton came out there, and he's like a cat. He just went right up over him. He came over to me, he says, "Lieutenant, I have to go back down there." And I said, "You don't have a gun down there, do you?" He said, "No, you can't do anything except throw rocks at him." So this is Sutton, this is myself. This is Richard Snyder. This is Wick Wycliffe. And this youngster, I can't remember his name. He was my photographer. He flew several missions with me, but I don't remember his name.
Would you happen to know if that could have been one of the first 262 shot?
Well, it was not one of the first that shot down. The heavies had shot him down before, and so did the fighters. But it was the first for my group. And it could well have been the only one for my group. This is the mission commander here who came over to talk to me about it. This is the airplane number 32 I was flying. And he came over to visit with me afterwards. But it's only with the grace of God that I raised that wing then at that precise time. I have another one I want to tell you about. It is commonly believed that Heidelberg was not bombed during the Second War, but it was bombed on March 23rd of 1945. And again, it was only 4 flights of B-26s, and I was flying the number 5 position of the lead flight. We were to bomb the marshalling yard and the rail area and the bridge in right downtown Heidelberg. And we were forewarned in our briefing that they told us, I don't know if this is correct or not, but they told us that they had to get President Roosevelt's permission to bomb Heidelberg because they were fearful we'd hit the university. And Heidelberg, to the best of my knowledge, was only bombed this one day. We did lose aircraft there. I had a young co-pilot that day. It was his first mission. He'd never flown a combat mission before. His name was Jim Green, and Jim was raised and lived down in Griffin, Georgia. Well, that's a pretty terrible experience to get exposed like this on your first mission. So we start our bomb run, and we're bombing to the north, and I know they're going to make a 180-degree break to the east, back to due south. And on the bomb run, Jim was not paying attention, and one of the problems you have with the 26 is in the bomb run, when you put the RPMs up, the oil in the engines tends to congeal, so you really need to close the flaps for the oil coolers. And Jim didn't do that. And so the first thing I knew I was in trouble was I couldn't stay with the formation. I didn't know why. And my turret called me and he said, "We're trailing smoke off the right engine." Well, we were taking a lot of flak at that point, and we were the first flight coming up on a target. And so as I started falling back, I attracted all the flak from the ground. Well, it takes 15 seconds for a round, an 88 round, that's 88 millimeter, which was the Germans' wonderful, for them, wonderful anti-aircraft. They also used it as a cannon, but it was a devastating anti-aircraft. And a real good crew can put up about 15 rounds a minute, and there were a number of crews down there, and they were putting a lot of flak up, and I was getting all of it. So what I did is, bear in mind we got the bomb bay doors open. I do not have a bomb sight. I got a bomb bay full of bombs that a lot of people went to a lot of trouble to get to my airplane, and here I am over the target, and I don't have a way of dropping them. And on top of that, I've been told that we had to have the president's permission to bomb this place. And I know there's an ancient university down there that they don't want damaged. And they're shooting at me. So I made a left-hand turn at about 30 degrees like so, and I started counting off mentally, 1,000, 2,000. And Sutton called me and he says, "What do you want me to do with these bombs?" And I said, "What do you see?" And he says, "We're right over the top of a big building with a big red cross on it," which I learned the next day was a Gestapo headquarters. It's supposed to be a hospital, but they did that. So I counted to 12 and made a turn like this, way over here, and the flak started breaking out here. And I counted 12 again and did it again. And in the meantime, I told Sutton, I said, "You watch to where our flight releases. And I will fly to that point and we will release. In the meantime, I've closed the cowl flaps, the oil flaps, trying to get the engine to respond properly. So I'm busy. And I watched to where they released, rolled it back around again, and as I did, flak was breaking out here. But this time I got my engine operating properly. We flew to that point, we released, the lead flight had gone on up and made 180 degrees, turned around like this, and I turned inside them, come around, joined up, going home. Nobody ever said boo to me. I was very afraid I was going to stretch back so far I was going to interfere with the bomb run of the second flight. I apparently did not, but I rejoined, went home, went through critique. No operation officer, no commanding officer, no one ever said anything to me that I should have brought him home or I shouldn't have done that. It just ignored it. And that's what happened to me so many times in the thing. There's two things. The military during that period wanted controlled aggression. That's where I learned the term. And what that means is that they wanted you to go take full advantage of the situation. But they wanted to control it. So, and they wanted you to be very aggressive, and we were. So hold on a minute. These are pictures of actual drops. You can see a bomb being released here. This is formation flights. There's two fighters here. In this formation, you can see two fighters up on top there, one back here and one right underneath the antenna there. And the same with the up top right. This will give you some idea of what the formation looked like. You can see the parallax in this wing because of the camera I took it with was with a fixed lens. This mission here, which was the largest mission I ever flew, was to Schweinfurt. We had 144 airplanes up that day, which was a maximum effort. The Rainbow Division was taking Schweinfurt. I have a copy of a letter from their general officer to our wing commander telling us that they interviewed the police chief in Schweinfurt after we had bombed it, after they took it. And he told them that Schweinfurt had been bombed 17 times during the Second World War. And some of the early missions that the B-17s came out of England with were, well, as I remember, the very first mission, they went down there with 240 B-17s and they lost 60 of them. That's 600 men. There's 10 men per airplane. And the police chief told the intelligence people in the Rainbow Division that our bombing was the most devastating of the 17, which I found very interesting. And the Rainbow Division went in and took it. There was something else I wanted to touch on there, and I can't remember what it was. I want to tell you about a unique little experience that can happen to you. You get killed with very innocent things. One day in January of '45, I got a call from operations, and I went up and they said, we want you, and they named another pilot. You two guys go up, take a 26 and go up to England and pick up some of our air crew on the rest camp. They go into England and we're up there for maybe a week or 10 days, something like that. So we were supposed to go up and pick them up. So we got the truck, went down to the operations on the line. I'll never forget it. It's like the tower you see in Catch-22, if you've ever seen the movie. It was all beat up. We went in there, and I can't remember this other pilot's name. I know his name was Richard. And he says, I'll tell you what, he says, I'll fly it up and you fly it back. And I said, fine. So we walk in there and get the squadron, the group operation, or group weatherman to get a weather briefing. And well, he was a character, and he says, where are you guys going? I said, we're going up to London to pick up some balls on rest camp. He says, let's see your orders. So Dick gave him a copy of the orders, and we weren't paying much attention. I saw him go over there and sit down at a typewriter, and he's typing, and he come back and typed his name on the orders. Says, I'm going with you. So we go out and crank this machine up, and Dick takes it off, and took off to the north at Dijon. And in the northeast corner of Dijon, there's a large church. I think it's a Catholic church. And we didn't even want to get the airplane up and get it all cleaned up. And Dick rolls it over and goes down. We're below the spire of that church. And he racks it back up, and we go to England. So this weatherman gets down in the nose, and he's a pretty strong-willed guy, and he's going to tell us how to fly our airplane. So he got down there, and in those days, to cross from France and England, they had prescribed areas that you had to fly within to cross the channel. And we had what was called IFF, it's Identification Friend or Foe, it's a transponder, so that the English with the radar and the early warning systems could determine that you were friendly as compared to being hostile. So we found this channel, or to cross the channel in. We started across, and we started getting cloud deck. We could see it build up over England, so we decided to get under it, and we did. And it was stratus, and we just got down to about 200 foot, and the further we went, the more it was forcing us down to the deck. And we got down to the point where we were about 20 foot off the deck. And all the time this weather officer was sitting up at the nose, so I guarantee you don't have to worry about it, it's going to be clear over England. And he kept saying it, and finally Dick looked at me and said, what do you think? And I said, I think we'd better get up. I said, we won't even see the White Cliffs of Dover, we'll drive right into them. And so I pushed the throttle, the props up, and Dick came up on the power. And neither one of us had flown the instruments for 6-8 months, so we really had to watch it carefully, because this airplane will get away from you in a hurry. So he heard this weatherman, he heard power come up, and he said, where are you guys going? I said, we're going up on top. And he said, I guarantee you it's going to be clear underneath. He said, you got to stay down here. And I said, well, you stay down, we're going up. Well, we broke out about 6,500 feet on top of this cloud deck. Now we're over England, and we don't know where we are. So we flew for a while. Fortunately, it topped out, and then started tapering down, and then eventually it broke out. And we had clear weather again. But we were hopelessly lost. We hadn't got a clue where we are. But they had this wonderful radar system, and so the procedure was, when you find an Air Force base, you just circle to the left, and you have a prescribed channel, and I pushed that channel. It was on UHF and called Black Sheep. And I heard his voice come back, and he said, what do you see? I said, we're circling an airdrome here. It's an airdrome in England, not an air base. And it's covered with Beauforts. And he says, where are you going? And I told him, and he says, stand by. And he come back, and he said, take up a heading of 060 and fly it for 12 minutes. It was right there. So we landed, and all the fellows were to pick up were there. Now it's my airplane. So the officer, they come up, and he said, you want to get gassed up? I said, yeah, we sure do. He says, you going back today? And I said, oh no, the weather's too bad. But you have to understand, we've been flying combat and eating C&K rations, and you can go downtown London, and even then you can go into good restaurants and get good food. We hadn't had anything like that for months. So we went down and spent the night in London and had a wonderful time. Come out the next day, it was a beautiful day. And we cranked it up and flew back to Dijon. I'll never forget, I went up to about 6,000 feet. Flew straight line from, after we got into France, down to Dijon. It took us right across Paris. You weren't supposed to fly over Paris, but I did. I could see the Eiffel Tower for 50 miles away. Beautiful sight.
Were you able to keep up with I know the people from high school. How about any of the people you flew with? Have you been able to keep up with them?
Very much so. Yeah, we have annual reunions, and I've seen many of them many times. So
on a regular basis you get together. As compared to nowadays and the way that combats are flown and so forth, what do you have to say to us as far as what your generation and what they went through, and maybe in a little bit of a compare and contrast sort of a situation?
You know, I'd like to, there's something I want to cover. I've discussed this with not only people who've been in combat, particularly with me. One of the things that you always wonder before you're exposed to it, and I've discussed this with young men of today, and the thing always comes up is, would I really have the fortitude to do that? Could I handle it? Can I stand it? And it's amazing. As I told you, I can recall all these incidents frame by frame. I know what it's like to be absolutely petrified with fear, but you can, it's amazing how you can function. On a bomb run, you're getting all this flak, your mouth will go so dry you have no saliva at all. You inhale cordite from the flak going off and you get the taste in your mouth. That odor today still will frighten me. And still, in all my combat experiences, I only saw a couple of instances of people who didn't show up to fly combat. A couple of stories like that, but some fellows were taxiing out down in Corsica before we took off, and one of the waist gunners decided he didn't want to go, so they're now there in a slow taxi, and he comes out the waist gun and goes running across the field. And the pilot, of course, doesn't even know it. So the pilot behind him called him up and says, "You're a man short." So he can't go, obviously. Yeah. We had a lieutenant who came in with a replacement crew in our outfit that his whole family was military. His father was a general officer. He had a brother that was a colonel in India. And in Dijon, we had taken a hotel over that belonged to our squadron, our group rather. And when we were in town, we had a place that we could go and spend the night or go to eat. And he was in town with his crew one night, and normally you would not stay in town overnight if you, in Dijon, if you were scheduled the next morning. But he did, and he had drank quite a lot that morning, or that night, and I think it was just a matter of impulse, but one of his crew members went in and got him out of bed, and he's sitting on the edge of the bed, and the crewman went someplace, came back, and he went out the window. So they couldn't fly the mission. And they did, they court-martialed him, and it was very sad because I think it was an impulse. I don't think he certainly did not premeditate it. It just, somebody decided he was not going to do that day. And it was very hard to watch. I mean, they stripped him of his rank, and of course he was pretty much ostracized in our outfit. He still lived with us for a matter of a few weeks before they sent him back for court-martial. Sad situation. We had a situation which parallels that a bit. The ground crewmen could, they were over there for the duration, but if they wanted to, they could go up and check out as a toggelier, and which was in effect a bombardier, and fly a tour of 65 missions or better, and then rotate home. So we went down, took our briefing one morning, and I'll never forget, we were just getting ready to get in the airplane, and George Belinsky came over to me and he said, "Richard, we got a problem." And I said, "What is it, George?" And he says, "Our bombardier's drunk." Oh boy. So I said, "Well, get him over here and let's talk to him." And so he came over and I said, "What's going on here?" He said, "Lieutenant," he says, "you know, I was ground crew and I got checked out as a toggelier, and they told me I was not going to fly a mission tomorrow, and I went to town and celebrated." And he says, "I come out and checked the schedule up on the bulletin board, and you're bombardier today." And he says, "I didn't know I was going to fly a mission today. They told me I wasn't." I said, "Well, the problem is this. If we don't go, you're going to get a court-martial. And if we do go, we got a drunk bombardier." I said, "Now, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll get you in the airplane, and we'll get you down the nose. And George will go back and pull the pins and arm the the bombs. But if we get in trouble, there's nobody gonna come down the nose to get you out of it. Now, you think you're sober enough to make that decision? I mean, are we gonna go or are we gonna stay and you take the consequences? Because I can't get another bombardier. I mean, he said, let's go. So we got him in the airplane. Of course, it took us 2 hours or so to get to the drop zone, and so he started sobering up. And he was responsible for doing our navigating, but I always copied. When we went to briefing, they would have legs up on the map. They put them up with pins and yarn, and they would read them off. They'd say you're going to fly a heading of 045 degrees for 12 minutes, and they'd give us a whole mission in minutes. So I carried a little index card, still do today, and I would write down those headings and time. So that if we got shot up or had a malfunction and I fell out of formation, I at least had some idea how to get out of where I was. And it worked out very well. You're surprised, you start learning that terrain, and even though you're flying formation, you know where you are pretty much all the time. Have you got any other questions?
In closing, is there anything that you would like to add to the interview that we have not covered?
Yeah. I'm a great believer that, excuse me, that all young people in this country should serve. I think it would do several things. One, I think that it would give them love of country. I think it would make for better citizens and better marriages because it would give them the stability that's so desperately needed. I don't know anyone who served that didn't benefit from it. I have a neighbor that I saw last night when I was walking my dog, and they had an unmanageable son, and they really didn't know what to do with him. And about 8 months ago, he went into the Navy. He's out in San Diego now. He loves it. He thinks it's wonderful. His mom and dad think it's wonderful. They can see him develop. So I think in closing that it would be wonderful that all young people in this country serve. And I think it could be tied to the education. I met Robert Dole, a senator, last year, and I talked to him about this. I told him the single best thing the U.S. Congress ever did was to pass the GI Bill of Rights. And I think if we had a program for young people to serve that was tied to giving them education, it would benefit the country immensely. So there.
Well, thank you very much for your time.